Welcome to the 128th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's Podium. For over a century, this platform has been a gathering place for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to discuss the most pressing issues of our time.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Van Biesen, Canadian Club Toronto President and today's event host. I am delighted to see how many members and guests have joined us here today and online. Our club works hard to bring you relevant topics and engaging speakers that respond to your need to connect and to stay on top of the issues that matter. Our ability to offer an outstanding slate of events is due in large measure to the incredible support of our sponsors, so please let me briefly acknowledge their generosity. We are grateful to have Agnico Eagle as our presenting sponsor today. Thank you for your contribution to the success of today's event. Our event sponsors are Bruce Power, CAA Insurance, CPA Ontario, and Waste Connections of Canada. Thank you for your support. Our club would also like to thank Bennett Jones for contributing to today's event. And to our season sponsor, Canadian Bankers Association, and our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, thank you. And finally, to Canada's Forest Trust, who help us reduce our carbon footprint by planting a small forest in our honor. Now, we're also pleased that the Political Science Department at the University of Toronto is in attendance with some of its students. So welcome. It's great to have you here today. And now let me take a moment to remind you of our website, because that's what I got to do. And it's on-demand content and event information. So please visit canadianclub.org, and while you're there, sign up to become a member if you haven't done so already. We also love it when you post about our events on social, so we invite you to do that on the social network platform of your choice. Now, I am sure that many of you will have questions about Ontario's finances, so please use the question cards on your table, and we will share them with our moderator. And for those joining remotely, please hit the Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen, and our team will be keeping an eye out for them. And now, I am very pleased to invite André Lette, Vice President, Ontario Operations, Agnico Eagle Mines, to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Tanya. On behalf of Agnico Eagle Mines, it's my pleasure to introduce Ontario's Finance Minister for the second year in a row to the podium of the Canadian Club. One of Canada's oldest mining companies, Agnico Eagle, started 67 years ago in a small town of Cobalt in Ontario. Since then, the company has grown to become Canada's largest mining company by market cap and the third largest gold producer in the world. Our company is deeply committed to Ontario, and our two operating mines, Macassa and Detour, provide good paying jobs for over 4,000 people, including hundreds of First Nations people. We believe the long-term potential of Ontario, one of the best places in the world for mining, and continue to invest in both our greenfield and brownfield operations. This year, we announced approval for the first phase of our Upper Beaver project in Kirkland Lake and our Detour Lake underground project. If fully approved, this project would represent more than $2 billion in investment and would create over 1,200 jobs. These investments would not have been possible without the leadership of this government, which has been working really hard to ensure the province remains globally competitive for mining through investments in energy, training, and an efficient regulatory process. As the world races to develop the critical minerals required to power the energy transition, Ontario stands to benefit. One estimate suggests a potential investment pipeline of $21 billion over the next 10 years that would create more than 50,000 new jobs and then add $3 billion per year to the province GDP. A continued focus on policies designed to incentivize mining, including training and supporting northern communities, will ensure Ontario remains a top jurisdiction for mining investment. The minister is someone who needs no introduction here, given the size of this audience. He's a very popular guy, as you can see. He's originally from Montreal. Now I have to take a breather here because it's a long resume, very impressive, okay? So originally from Montreal, the minister holds both a bachelor's degree in physiology and a master's in business administration from McGill, as well as a master's in arts from the University of Toronto. Prior to entering politics, the minister had a successful career in finance, working as chief investment officer at CST Consultants, senior vice president financial regulations at Manulife Financial, co-president of DBRS Limited, and president and chief operating officer of TD Securities in New York. Minister Bethlenfalvy was first elected in 2018 to represent Pickering-Uxbridge and served as the president of the Treasury Board before becoming Ontario's finance minister in 2020. As finance minister, he has managed through the pandemic, the reopening of our economy, the challenge of housing and affordability, and has balanced the need to maintain fiscal restraint while still investing in areas that will ensure the long-term growth of the province. Minister, on behalf of Agnico Eagle Mines, I want to thank you for your government's support to the mining sector and your commitment to the public service. We look forward to hearing your remarks and the conversation with the Honourable John Baird, a former senior federal cabinet minister and Treasury Board president currently serving as senior business advisor of Bennett Jones LLP. Minister, the Canadian Club podium is yours.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. It's great to be here. This is my 9th address to the Canadian Club. Since I'm from, go ahead, yeah. You know, I've got to learn, because I say when I get to numbers like that, I always think of hockey players. So this is my Maurice Richard, because he was number 9, but then I remember I got to get elected in Ontario. So I better start learning the Toronto Maple Leafs numbers. You know, this is great to see so many people out again, and thank you for being here. And I'll just give a few quick remarks because, you know, John Baird here, you know, he's been in government, he's been a cabinet minister, but he's also been in His Majesty's loyal opposition, so he really knows how to ask a question, and he'll hold me to account in a few minutes. So I'll just want to say a few things about our fall economic statement, and then some of the challenges that we're facing as a province, as a country, given what's going on south of the border and in the world. First, let me talk about the fall economic statement and the good news. This is, without question, a good news fall economic statement. and for a number of reasons. Let me highlight first off our deficit track. You know, I got into government. I'm a fiscal conservative. I got in. Globe and Mail did a piece on me the first week I was finance minister, said Bethlenfalvy got into politics to tackle deficits. And that's the core, because I really believe that if you're fiscally responsible, you can have economic health, you can have physical and mental health in the whole province. So our deficit improved by over $9 billion. If you count the public accounts, or closed our books just a few weeks ago for the fiscal year, our deficit was $600 million. We almost balanced. Now, the economy has gone down because of high interest rates, so we have a deficit of $6.6 billion this fiscal year, but that's an improvement of $3.2 billion. And then next year, we have a deficit forecast of $1.5 billion. And the following year, we have a $900 million surplus. It's been a long time that any Ontario finance minister can claim a path to balance that's within sight and this close. And let me say, I've said a few times, if Ontario was a country, and being a Quebecer, I'm not advocating for that. But if Ontario, think about this, if Ontario was a country, we'd be in the G20. Now think really hard about any G20 country that has a path to balance. I'd submit virtually no one has a path to balance, certainly not within 2 years that we have. You know, if I look across the country, you know, BC doesn't, Quebec doesn't, and of course the folks up the 401 in Ottawa, 5-year fiscal forecast, no path to balance. So we stand out. And also, we stand out in another way among the majors. We're the only major province or country to get credit upgrades. My old firm, DBRS, and thank you for the introduction. By the way, Agnico Eagle, you think about them, their market cap's over $60 billion. What a great Canadian company, so congratulations. And, you know, I believe you got to venerate your champions, you know, and there's a great Canadian champion right there. But our upgrades, credit rating upgrade from DBRS, 15 years ago, I was the president of DBRS and downgraded in 2009, downgraded the credit rating. Then I became finance minister, and now the shoe's on the other foot. And I got to get it up almost to the day in June of 2024, we got an upgrade to AA. And Moody's and S&P has Ontario on credit watch, positive credit watch for a potential credit upgrade. What does this mean, though? Our interest expense, our borrowing costs are the lowest they've been in over a decade. And why does that matter? I'd rather, you know, rather than pay bondholders interest expense, nothing against the financial people here, but I'd rather pay down debt or invest in healthcare or invest in other programs than give it to bondholders. Our interest expense went down last year by $1 billion. This year, it's forecast to go down by $1.2 billion against our forecast, and over the 3-year period, by $4 billion. That's $4 billion by being fiscally responsible that I can pay down debt, that I can invest in critical infrastructure. It gives you so many more options. And then finally, I would say that, as I said, the spreads that we borrow at are the lowest in the country and the first time in 10 years. So that's our fiscal picture. It allows us to do so much more. And what are we doing with our stronger fiscal situation? Well, first off, we are providing taxpayer rebates to people. Now you say, why are you giving $15 million, 15 million people $200? Because, you know, in my riding in Pickering and in Uxbridge and all over Ontario, I can tell you, I'm out there, knocking on doors on Friday, knocking on doors on Saturday. The vast majority of Ontarians are struggling. They're struggling with the high cost of groceries. They're struggling with the high cost of gas, and they're struggling with high cost of housing. And providing some timely relief at a time when they really need it is what this government's been all about. We have been providing relief. We cut the gas tax. We're continuing that. We cut the driver's license stickers. We cut that. We cut the wine tax for those that like to drink wine. We cut the wine tax. We froze the beer tax. And in Durham, in my region, in Durham, the previous government put the tolls on the 412, 418, only place in the whole province they put them on, and we took them off. We're putting money back into the pockets of people of Ontario. In healthcare, we're investing more in healthcare. I had the privilege to announce last week with the Premier an increase to the fertility program, and introduce for the first time a fertility tax credit. Now, for those that are impacted by this, this is a massive infusion of hope for their families. I met some of them this morning, and it really is it's a game changer for people trying to have families and raise children. We increased as well the number of medical seats. You know that we created a new university for doctors at U of T, a new one for TMU, and a new one for York University. First time in decades to have more doctors, including family doctors. So we announced not only the increased amount of seats, but also that they would go to Ontario students, Ontario family individuals, and 95% and another 5% for Canadian. So because it's hard, yes, thank you. Yeah, well, there's one guy. I see that's Alan Odette. He used to be the head of the Ontario Medical Association. So, and of course, we've got the new president of the Ontario Medical Association, which supported that announcement. But here's the other thing. The Learn and Stay program, what's that? If you, this is new that we announced in the fall economic statement. If you go to a university for medical school and you stay in the community that you study in for 5 years, we'll pay your tuition. We'll pay your expenses. So think if you're studying in Thunder Bay or Sault Ste. Marie or London, Ontario, Kingston or Ottawa or wherever you are, this is going to allow for 7,300 more family doctors to go through our system, which is over 1 million patients that will be rostered. So we announced that in the fall economic statement. On the economic front, we're not going to take our foot off the economic pedal. We've got an Invest Ontario, which is our mechanism to help support investment in this province, an increase of $100 million. And the life sciences. Let's not forget the life sciences. We've got the largest life sciences ecosystem in Canada right here in Ontario. So we're investing an additional $5 billion over the life of the program for, not investing another, $140 million to the $5 billion industry. So we're not going to give up on that. Thirdly, what was in the fall economic statement? Infrastructure. $191 billion program, 10 years capital, to build physical infrastructure. Now, it took me quite a while to get down here from Queen's Park, just down to the Royal York. You've all witnessed it. I think I might get a little bit of applause if I tell you that we're tackling bike lanes. Because we got to move people and goods. And so we're tackling that. We're also tackling physical, social infrastructure, building more hospitals, more broadband, more schools, more long-term care. So that's a critical part of our plan that we're advancing. Also for workers, who's going to build all these things and who's going to actually service all these things? Our Skills Development Fund, we've invested over $1.4 billion in the past 3 years on skills development, retraining, reskilling 600,000 workers for the jobs of not only today, but for tomorrow. It's another $224 million just this year for our capital stream. In fact, we just announced a few weeks ago with LIUNA, private sector union, a new training facility that we partnered in building. And we also have the stream that we announced, the $260 million for the training of the same people that are going to be in those facilities. They're going to be the people that are going to build the physical infrastructure, the social infrastructure that I talked about. And let me end on one thing. Some of you might like alcohol in this room. Well, let me tell you, I'm also responsible for the LCBO. And we put in the fall economic statement, we've been modernizing alcohol. You know, being a Quebecer, you know, buying my beer and wine at a dépanneur at the legal age. You know, come to Ontario, I tried to find a beer. I went to the 7-Eleven. This is a few years ago. I couldn't find one. Went up to the grocery store. Guess what? Back then, you couldn't get a beer at the grocery store. I spent the whole day trying to find a case of beer. And I finally found it at the beer store. So I committed in that moment that we would modernize and bring Ontario to the 21st century. Back then it was the 20th century, so that's how long it took. What we announced in the fall economic statement was the LCBO's revenues, because of our modernization, are going up within 3 years by almost $1 billion. Our bottom line is going up significantly. Why is that? Because We negotiated a deal where we're going to be increasing our market share in wholesaling from 51% to 73%. And if you look at the numbers, it's quite powerful. So the LCBO, this is a huge win for the LCBO, but also the convenience stores. Over 4,000 convenience stores applied for and got a license to sell beer and wine in their convenience stores. They tell me it's a game changer. They put out a study that they said they're going to hire 7,000 more employees in their convenience stores. So this is really good for small businesses like convenience stores who've been neglected for way too long, and for the workers who are going to be in those stores, some 7,000 new employees. And finally, who's the big winner? Consumers. You know, whether you go to Costco or grocery store, or convenience store, or the LCBO, or you do it online, we're providing convenience and choice that much of the world already takes for granted, and we brought it to Ontario. So we got it done, and we're going to continue pushing in that vein. Now let me pivot for a second to challenges, and I'll just end on this. You know, tomorrow we have a monumental day in the United States. This is probably the biggest election in our lifetimes. And how are we approaching it? And that might be a question I'll leave for John Baird to ask me, but I'll just tell you that we've been working on our plan for the U.S., regardless of who wins tomorrow, for some time. Our global economy, too, we have to watch because, you know, central banks are easing credit right now, but that could easily slip. And it's had an impact, you know, clearly it's had an impact on our economy because our GDP has come down from last year. It's going up relative to what I said in the budget, so it's now 0.9 for this year. We're projecting 1.7% real GDP for the following year, and then 2.3% in year 3. But we got to keep an eye on it. The other big challenge is, you've heard the word transition. And I'm going to talk about two forms of transition. One is the energy transition, and the second is the AI transition. Both, almost two industrial revolutions happening at the same time. You know, going to net zero is not simple. Ontario is incredibly well placed to get to net zero. In fact, our grid is almost 90% clean energy right now. Do you know that India is 75% coal for their electricity generation? China is 60%. You know, Germany is over 20%. Japan's over 20%. Australia is 65%. In Ontario, zero coal, and the future is going to be around nuclear energy. It's going to be around renewables and hydro. We already have one of the cleanest grids on the planet, and we're going to expand that footprint, as you've probably heard from our Minister of Energy and Electrification, Stephen Lecce. So it's a massive transition that Ontario, frankly, is one of the best positioned jurisdictions in North America. Relative to Quebec, Ohio, New York, Michigan, we've got a nuclear footprint. We got public support for nuclear. And we have the capabilities to expand that, including my own riding of Pickering-Uxbridge, where I have very broad support in my riding, where we're going to be refurbishing the Pickering nuclear station. I'm going to quickly mention AI. And why do I mention that? Technology is revolutionizing everything. And AI is a core part of that. And again, Ontario is extremely well positioned because we have so many technology advantages, whether it's for our education system, our footprint here, next to the largest market in the world. And also on data centers, which, by the way, require a tremendous amount of energy. We've got a competitive advantage in terms of lots of land, cold water, and a capability to be able to power those with our energy transformation. So when I think about the fall economic statement, I say good news fiscally, good news economically, good news for our infrastructure and our growing population. But I also say it's good news given the challenges that we're facing. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, our plan is working. I'm happy to take John Baird's questions right now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. Great to have you here at the Canadian Club. At your 10th visit, you have to get re-elected, but you get a special jacket, I'm told.
Yeah,
just like Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live, yeah.
First, let me thank you for your service. You know, we have a real challenge in this country, in this province, to get good people to run for office. You are probably the most qualified person to ever be Minister of Finance in Ontario. So thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I also have to thank you for the bike lane announcement. I'm a big supporter. You mentioned briefly in your remarks what's happening tomorrow. And I think there's big challenges for Ontario, big challenges for Canada, whoever wins. We have a NAFTA renegotiation in 2026. Free trade agreements are supposed to be about certainty, long-term certainty, but we don't have that. What are you doing to prepare for Wednesday morning?
Well, everyone hold your breath, that's for sure, for the next 48 hours or beyond. You know, you touched on it. It doesn't matter who gets elected tomorrow. You have to remember Kamala Harris voted against the Canadian-U.S. free trade agreement. If she wins the blue wall states, those are all protectionist states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and help me out with the third, Pennsylvania. So regardless of who wins tomorrow, it's going to be a challenge on the trade front. One of the strategies that we've been employing is signing MOUs. And we just signed 5 MOUs with governors of Indiana, Illinois, New Jersey, Nevada, and New Jersey. I think I said that. Yeah, New Jersey, Nevada. So these are just the 5 that we've just signed. We've also got people in Dallas, in San Francisco, in New York, in Chicago, and Washington, D.C. So we have boots on the ground. The other thing that we've been doing, our ministers have been meeting with governors repeatedly and down in Washington, D.C. for years now, building relationships. Because you got to build relationships with, not just in Washington, but really at the state level. The governors, their state representatives, the senators in the state legislatures. And let's think about this. Ontario's two-way trade with the U.S. is almost $500 billion. And it's pretty well balanced. If I think about that, 17 states that were the #1 trading partners, 11 that were #2, that's over half the states. Millions and millions and millions of jobs are because we export into their markets and they export into our market. So neither side is going to want to jeopardize that, but we need to have the governors and all those. Now, I got to tell you, Tim Walz was up here just before he got appointed vice president, and the premier gave him Canadian Football League football. I got to tell you, more governors have CFL footballs in the U.S., and that doesn't happen overnight. So relationships, boots on the ground. We got to tell the story too, because I got to tell you, the senators that I talk to in Washington, they take us for granted. They tell us, we're so sorry. But you know, we got issues around the world and we often take Canada for granted. So it's incumbent on us to continue to tell that story, build a relationship, and work as one team. You know, you take off your conservative hat, your liberal hat, and you put on the Team Canada hat, and that's what we're doing.
Great. You've targeted a surplus for 2026. Tell me, how do you balance off the pressure to spend more money with being fiscally conservative and getting us back to balance?
Well, I think one of the ways you do it is, you know, we're both, you're heavily in the private sector now, and I came from the private sector, and you have to have a vision and a plan. And we, in our budget in 2022, after COVID, put together a plan and a vision to build Ontario, to put infrastructure, to train workers, to rebuild the economy, strengthen our healthcare, and help with costs. And we ran on that budget. Imagine running on your strategic plan if you're a CEO. Here's my plan, and I'm going to vote for me for CEO on my team. And that's what we did, and we got a bigger majority. Okay, great. But now you got to follow up that and tell people how you're following up on that plan, how you're doing. And that's what this fall economic statement is, just a continuation of that plan, you know, to build that critical infrastructure, because our population is going to continue to grow. Our population grew by 1 million people in the last 2 years. You better have a plan to build the roads and the subways and the schools and the hospitals and so on and so forth. So I think, John, what I would say is have the plan, and then I'm out every 90 days. And let me tell you, sometimes it's not the best experience or my favorite thing to do, face the media for every 90 days. But I'm happy to do it, because what CEO of a private sector company that has public float on shares wouldn't face their investors every 90 days? You got to tell people how you're doing against your plan. Take the tough criticism questions, because that provides transparency. It tells people and gives them what you're doing, gives them confidence about what you're doing. So that's how we're executing against the plan.
What's your confidence for 2026 as surplus?
You know, one of the things about putting a projection together, the day after you go, okay, things have changed. And I think I'm pretty confident, and I'll tell you why. You know, we've been able to invest in that critical infrastructure like healthcare. We're transforming our healthcare system, more primary care, more home care, digitizing that care. We spent over $10 billion in the last 2 years on that healthcare. We put the foundations in place that I think that are necessary, for example, in healthcare. We'll continue to grow that. I have confidence because the economy, look, I'll put our Ontario companies up against anybody's. We've got an incredible talent base in this province. You've also got a government that's completely got a mindset to support the conditions for economic growth. You know, whether it's red tape, we have a minister of red tape reduction. We got a minister for small business. We've now got a minister for energy and electrification. All the things that you need to do to kind of power and set the conditions for that economic growth. So I have a lot of confidence in the workers and the businesses in Ontario to be able to hit those targets. I also think that we're very prudent in our forecasting. We haircut the private sector forecast, so we're always prudent that way. And we're also build in prudence into our forecast so that I have enough, money for unforeseen events. So all those things combine. And so I think, we'll see what happens tomorrow. That could change things quite a bit. But, this is a government that's very committed, John, to balancing the budget, has a plan to do it, and I stand in front of the people of Ontario every 90 days to tell them how we're doing.
Well, here, I'll say two things. You can't balance it fast enough, in my opinion. But I'll say a second thing is when you bring in a fall economic statement or a budget, no one goes to bed the night before worried that you're going to raise their taxes. We've got the first question from the audience that I'll throw to you. You dealt with bike lanes. This is another long line. Does the provincial government intend to assist municipalities in solving the tent encampment problem?
So, I've spent a lot of time with the municipalities, and just go step back a bit. Over the last 5 years, our government has increased funding to municipalities by 45%. That's 10% a year. We're providing a lot of funding for a range of things. I did a new deal with Toronto and Ottawa because they had the disproportionate share of asylum seekers. Toronto had the subways challenges and also the DVP and the Gardner. On the homelessness side, I increased the budget for the homelessness prevention program by 40%. I could have done it 10% a year. I did 40% up front, John. Increased it from 500 to 700. 200 million increase over 5. That's another $1 billion for supportive housing and for wraparound services. So we'll continue to be there to work with municipalities. We've given them a lot of financial resources. We also need Ottawa to step up because we cut a check to Toronto on asylum seekers to help with the housing and all the needs that they have. But we made it conditional on the federal government, who's responsible for immigration, and I'm a big supporter of immigration, but they've got to be at the table with the checks too. Just can't open up the borders and give them $5 like they did to my dad in 1951 when he came from Hungary. You got $5, and then you're on your own. So we've stepped up now. The federal government stepped up for 1 year, but it's not a one-year challenge. It's a multiple-year challenge. So when you work together, municipalities, provincially, federally, you can do a lot more.
I got to tell you, as a resident of Toronto now, I was pleasantly surprised the relationship between Doug Ford and Olivia Chow. Both have really stepped up their games and appears to be better than anyone could have thought.
Well, I think it's a constructive relationship, and we'll see over these bike lanes. But we'll continue. We'll continue to have dialogue. I think the bike lane issue, which you mentioned, and I've had more people come up to me and say, fantastic. Now, many of you, I'm sure, bike. I do, and it's good and it's fair. And but on arterial roads, I think very much about Toronto as 50% of the GDP of this province. You clog up those arteries, those physical arteries, and I include the airport downtown. I include the DVP and the Gardner, which at certain times was discussed that maybe we'll tear it down. The council was thinking about tearing it down or shutting the airport down at Billy Bishop. We're clogging up our main arteries like University, Bloor, and others. We got to make sure that we keep this economic heartbeat of Ontario and Canada. It's 20% of Canada's GDP right here. We've got to keep it going because when you grow the pie, you can then continue to invest in world-class healthcare, world-class education, take care of the most vulnerable, build the infrastructure to accommodate more people. You know, depending on what happens tomorrow, we could see an influx of people wanting to come into Canada. You know, so we've got to be ready for all scenarios. And I, for one, want to continue to make Canada and Ontario a place of hope and freedom and democracy that it was for my parents, who came here in the early 50s with nothing but the shirt on their backs. And they didn't ask Canada for anything. And Canada gave them the opportunity to raise a family, to get a good job, to get an education, and in one generation, have me sitting next to you here, John.
There you are. One other question from the audience. What more should Ontario do to boost productivity to ensure our future prosperity?
How much time do we have, John? Oh, the
Reader's Digest version.
The old age productivity. Well, look, we have to boost productivity. And I will say this, it used to be productivity was a four-letter word where you'd say, well, that means job losses. No, this is the opposite. This is job security. This is bigger paychecks. If we can boost our productivity, we can raise incomes for workers right across Ontario. So this is about raising income, having job security, and it's critical. Now, there's many aspects to productivity. There's no magic bullet in my mind, but it's a range of things: taxes, technology, competition, red tape, energy security, free trade. You know, all these things come together. And one thing that we don't really say this out loud, but what we do every single day, like our economic strategy, our infrastructure strategy, our worker strategy, is so that we can get bigger paychecks and more job security for people of Ontario.
In your fall economic statement, you highlighted $191 billion for infrastructure over the next 10 years. I remember being Infrastructure Minister of Canada announcing that funding to renovate and expand Union Station, and they proudly said it'll all be done in 6 years. Well, we're 15 years in and it's still quite not done. What can we do to ensure you meet those targets? What transformational changes can we make that allows you to get this stuff done?
Well, I would answer it a couple of ways. First off, you know, the more you do, the better you get at it. If I remember nuclear refurbishments, the first ones were over time and over budget. But then the expertise and the know-how, and I know we've got folks from Bruce Power. Yeah, they're staring right at me here. But also in Darlington, which is owned by Ontario Power Generation, so all of us. Those refurbishments are coming in on time and on budget, and the cost benefit is powerful. Clean energy, green energy, good jobs, safe. We're going to do it for Pickering. So I think that kind of expertise really helps. That the more you do, the better you get at. You learn from your mistakes and so on. I think the other thing, so, you know, I worked on, it was my ministry that did the Toronto deal, and part of that deal was to upload the DVP and the Gardner. You know, because those are significant assets that we got to make sure are in good repair and, you know, move people and goods. And then after the deal was signed, Toronto said, okay, so we're going to refurbish, you know, have to do repairs for 3 years. 3 years. My parents live out in Etobicoke. You know, I have to hoof it down the Gardner. I can't imagine people who have to do that every day. It's an artery for us. So I gave them some more money to do it 24/7. Korea, Japan, other countries know how to construct things 24/7. Shrink the time it takes to do things. And actually, the cost benefit starts to show that actually when you do things quicker, the costs don't go up, there isn't time for scope creep, you know, and people are happier and it's more productive. I think, you know, the Toronto Board of Trade is here and they highlighted gridlock is $11 billion lost in productivity. So it's just basic math. The quicker you do things, the more efficiently, the more you do, the better outcomes you get.
And having a 10-year plan is better than a 2-year plan, which traditionally has been done in Ontario and federally, so good for you on that. This is not a question for me, but this is to show how fair and balanced I'm being. You got one question from the audience. $200 per person. Can we get this directed to healthcare instead?
Yeah. I thought that was Mike Schreiner clapping, but no, it's the head of the OMA. You know, by the way, there's only 18 billionaires in Toronto, but there's 15 million. So I kidded with Mike Schreiner this morning. He says, I know. Look, I've already made the case why so many people need the money today. Not in a tax return 2 years from now or some other mechanism when we balance. We're so close to balancing now. They need the money today. But I'll tell you something else, and I think the OMA should really understand this. It's not either or. It's and. Look at what we're doing to invest in our health care. And we've been doing it for years. We've increased the funding for healthcare by $10 billion just over the last 2 years, and that's continuing. You've never seen increases in funding like that for hospitals, for OHIP, for physicians, for nurses, for building the infrastructure. I really think in healthcare, we have to work together. So that's my message to the OMA and the OHA and all the others in the healthcare, who, by the way, do a phenomenal job. They really are. These are some of the best people, yeah. I mean, they work tirelessly to keep us alive. You know, think about that for a second. And dispassionately, this is their passion. But I think three things that we've got to do in healthcare. I think we got to invest, and we have been investing significantly in primary care. You know, last week, CIHI, the group that does the numbers across Canada, said Ontario has 88% of its population attached to a doctor. Now, that's the highest in Canada, and in some cases by quite a margin. But that means almost 12% don't have a doctor. So we got to close that gap. And we've been putting money in to close that gap. Haven't just waited to this fall economic statement. We've been doing it for years, and we're continuing that path. Number two, we've got to continue to recruit, train, and retain family doctors. That's why we've created new medical schools. And I mentioned the Learn and Stay to incent doctors to first to go in and then stay in their community. So it's an Ontario-wide thing. And then, of course, thirdly, on primary care, we just got Dr. Jane Philpott, who's got a lot of knowledge and expertise in primary care. We're working together so we can close that gap. That's number one. Number two, home care. Now, my dad is, he's in Etobicoke right now. He's got a nurse and personal support worker there. We're fortunate that we can have that. He would rather be taken care at home. Who doesn't want to be taken care at home if you can be? As our population grows and ages, we've got to transform our system to deliver that health care as much as possible in the community and at home. And we've been investing billions in that transformation, billions. And thirdly, digital. Coming back to our technology, you know, I keep looking at the doctor who does a great job as head of the OMA now for 1 year. Too much paperwork, too much administration. And the vision that we have is that it's just like a school. If you move from, I don't know, Pickering to Mississauga, and you have kids, you're going to have a spot in the school. But you should also have portability of your records, and you should have a doctor. You shouldn't have to work hard to find a new doctor. So I think that we're transforming this healthcare system, because if we don't and expect a different outcome, you know, that's the definition of insanity. We have to transform this system. We have to invest in primary care, invest in home care, and digitize. And then I think we've got a shot for a growing and aging population.
I'd say number 4 also, because there's 5 hospitals on University Avenue, and less congestion will allow those ambulances to get to the hospitals faster.
So you want those bike lanes out?
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
I'm a one-issue voter.
Working on it.
Tell us, how do you balance off the declining immigration targets with economic growth? This is from the audience.
Yeah, it's a great question. So last 2 years, our population grew about 500,000 a year. Think about that, you know, from 15.1 to 16.1 million, even with these caps. And by the way, the federal government has completely mismanaged the immigration file, I humbly submit. But one of the impacts, it will have an impact on the economy. We're analyzing that. But there's a lot of offsets to that. And by the way, the numbers take a long time to kind of ratchet down. So we'll still have a significant growth in our population. I think one of the things you got to keep doing, though, is investing in that physical infrastructure and that social infrastructure that I talked about. You know, we've got new schools coming in Pickering, a growing population there. Durham region's growing at 7%, so maybe they'll grow at 6%. That's still a heck of a lot of growth that's happening. So we've just got to continue to invest in that infrastructure, continue to invest in the economy, keep transforming our healthcare system, and I'll end with, and balance the books. You can do, it's not either or, it's and we're committed to getting it done.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. Is that it? Thank you. That's one of the mic drop.
That was a mic drop, literally. Minister Bethlenfalvy, Honourable John Baird, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, thank you both for taking the time this afternoon to share your thoughts, bike lanes, priorities with us today. We are delighted that our podium, Minister Bethlenfalvy, is an important and regular stop for you, so we look forward to number 10. Speaking on behalf of everyone here today, I'm sure that our audience appreciates your focus on building our economy for all, on ensuring that we have the right working infrastructure in place and positioning us for a balanced budget. We wish you continued success in your leadership role. John, of course, thank you for moderating this very important discussion. It is always good to have you at our podium with your expertise. For those who deposited their cards for a book, congratulations to the two winners of our prize draw today for a copy of the book Earn It, Unconventional Strategies for Brave Marketers by Steve Pratt. And those two names are Clayton Yaukusher of the University of Toronto and Rob Bull at Sinai Health. So congratulations to the two of you. You can collect your book as you exit at the door. And then finally, before we close, I would like to invite you to join us to some of our upcoming events. We have a very busy November ahead of us with lots of great guests, so bear with me. I will share those with you now. This Thursday, November 7th, we host Kimberly Murray, Independent Special Interlocutor for Missing Children and Unmarked Graves and Burial Sites associated with Indian residential schools. On Tuesday, November 12th, we will host Michael McCain of Maple Leaf Foods to discuss Bill C-69 and the perils of green hushing. On Thursday, November 14th, Leader of Canada's NDP, Jagmeet Singh, will join us at the podium. On Friday, November 15th, we will host Canada's Minister of Immigration, the Honourable Mark Miller, to punctuate your last point. And on November 22nd, we host the Honourable Caroline Mulroney, President of the Treasury Board of Ontario. We hope to see you all there. And finally, I would like to give one more shout out to our presenting sponsor, Agnico Eagle, and to our event sponsors, Bruce Power, CAA Insurance, CPA Ontario, and Waste Connections of Canada. Thank you all for your support. And finally, thank you is also due to our club's AV supplier, VBC Live. We could not do this without you. We are very grateful that you all joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.